Hello and welcome back to the Tea and the Buddy podcast. I'm Dominic.
And I'm Erica.
And today we're going to be talking about Now and Then, the Beatles. Their newest single. It's out. After 54 years.
Now and Then, the Beatles.
It's not after 54 years. They've released Free as a Bird and Real Love in the meantime from the anthologies. But this is their first one in about 20 odd years.
I keep seeing people on TikTok saying, this is the only Beatles song that'll ever be released in our lifetimes. And I'm just like, oh God.
When were you born?
I'm old, apparently.
I'm old too, apparently, yeah. I mean, yeah, because I remember the anthology releases.
Yeah.
Free as a Bird and Real Love. And if, you've probably been hearing about it, it's been big news. They released it last Thursday, I think. It was like after almost 20 years.
Yeah.
The newest song that they were going to originally release on the third anthology album, but then they never did.
Yeah. I'm sorry, you guys. If my voice gets caught in my throat, it's because I'm sick again.
Very sick.
Yes.
I think, my voice kind of is
all this traveling and everybody's hacking and sneezing everywhere we go.
And you're going,
not covering their mouths. Every time someone sneezes near me and doesn't cover their face or coughs and doesn't cover their mouth, I just shoot Dominic the most disgusted look because I'm just like, I just know. And inevitably.
They just go, in your face.
Yes.
Which they've known to do, haven't they?
Yes. Jeez.
But yes, Now and Then it debuted at number 42 in the UK.
Oh, yeah?
Based on just 10 hours of sales.
Oh, okay.
But is now expected to jump 41 places to the top of the official singles chart when the chart is published this Friday, November 10th.
I mean, if I'm seeing it on TikTok, it's getting popular.
Yeah. If it makes it, it will be the Beatles' first number one in the UK since The Ballad of John and Yoko in 1969.
Oh, yeah?
Let It Be never made it to number one.
And Real Love nor Free as a Bird did either?
No, they didn't. They only made... I think Free as a Bird made it to number 2.
I don't know. Do you have the stats there on what they did in the States?
They were all number 1 in the States.
Were they?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but the UK is a little bit more of a tough crowd after 1964. It's like... I mean, they were always... Because, the first time they didn't get number 1
There's more people here, more fans. You know what I mean?
Well, I suppose so.
More people equals more fans. Just...
Yeah. They didn't get number 1 in 1967. Famously, I think Penny Lane was kept off the top spot by Engelbert Humperdinck and Please Release Me, Let Me Go.
Oh, God, yeah.
Everybody's like, oh, God. So, Free as a Bird, I think, was kept off the top spot by Michael Jackson's Earth Song.
Oh, yeah.
In 1996 or 5 or whenever it was.
Okay.
But yeah, and Real Love, I don't think it got into the top 10.
If you guys, if us talking about the Beatles seems weird to you, then you haven't been with us very long.
Oh, yes, we're massive Beatles
We're
fans.
huge Beatles fans. That's how we met, based on our mutual Beatles love. Is that right?
The mutual Beatles love.
A mutual love for
Now
the
and
Beatles
then.
there. That's the correct way to say it. Yeah, so this is a very on-brand topic for us.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I haven't been keeping up with what is going on in Beatle world. And so I didn't even realize they were working on this until,
to be fair, Paul has been working on this since 1995.
Well, yeah.
The history of this is in 1994, Yoko Ono gave Paul McCartney 2 cassette tapes she had previously mentioned to George Harrison, and they included home recordings that John had done or completed, never completed or released commercially. 2 of them was on one tape being the eventually completed and released Free as a Bird and Real Love, which they worked on and they as a band.
Yeah.
For the anthology. The 2 other songs on the other tape were Grow Old With Me, which was released on that 1984 Milk and Honey.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was already released. They weren't going to bother with that. And then the other one was this Now and Then.
Yeah.
And so in 1995 they began to work on it and they recorded a rough backing track that was to be used as like an overdub.
Yeah.
However, after only like...
George thought it was crap.
2 days of recording, all work on the song ceased and plans for a third reunion single was scrapped. And Jeff Lynne, who was producing the sessions, said, it was only really an afternoon, and George didn't really want to do it because they were working in 1995. They had this, they had computer technology to separate the tape.
Yeah.
The vocals off the tape, but it wasn't great like it is now.
Yeah.
Because they use artificial intelligence now.
They've only kind of just now been able to do this.
They've only... and it's
like
Peter
literally
Jackson.
Just now.
Peter Jackson and his production company, Wingnut, they created this kind of like the Mal machine, which was named after the Beatles' road manager, Mal Evans. And they used it on the Get Back film, where they managed to separate everything into tracks.
Mm. Yeah.
And then they started doing that, and they were like, if we can do this, then they can do this, they can remaster and remix all the old Beatle tracks that you couldn't before, you know? So they thought, if he can do that, we can send... Paul was like, can you get a better sound off this tape,
Yeah.
And it was Sean Lennon who had the original demo of it, because they were using like a third generation tape in the Beatles were in 1995. So it was like there was like this hum and this hiss and stuff like that,
So she didn't give them the original.
She didn't give them the original. She didn't want Paul having it, probably. So Paul's going to try and sell it, and it's mine. It's worth millions, Paul. No, she probably gave them a third generation tape because she was like, I know Paul's going to keep this.
Yeah. So
she recorded it again, So just record it again and just give Paul
There's Beatles fans who are not happy that this song has come out because George publicly said...
Well, and Paul confirmed
the song wasn't good.
We were democratic and we didn't finish it, but
that the song wasn't good, it wasn't complete enough, and then the quality just wasn't there for them to add to it, It
was low quality recording, and Paul later stated that Harrison called Lennon's demo recording effing rubbish.
But the thing is, these fans who are like, George didn't want it, and so Paul's gone ahead and done this. It's like, okay, but that was then. This is now. And would George want to do it with this new technology?
I have a feeling he probably would be okay with it.
I think he would.
Yeah. But really right now, it's Paul's baby.
They were all kind of very into technology and using it in different ways and however they could,
Well, it's funny because, for that, they released a 12-minute documentary to accompany the song.
Right,
and they released that on Disney Plus and the Beatles YouTube channel. You should go check that out. Where they have, like, outtakes and footage from the anthology sessions where George is going to, like, Paul. He goes, these... this computer's man, I've been telling you about this before. It's like, Jeff has done this. And back then, that was kind of like revolutionary that they could actually cut a bit of tape.
Yeah.
And, make it go where it was supposed to go in the song, so they can use it,
Yeah.
But now, of course, you can do that easily on a laptop. I can do that easily, just move the tracks around, record them and whatever,
Right.
But back then it was a bit harder because everybody was still using actual tape.
Yeah.
And, the computers were coming out and, the technology wasn't there yet, but now it is here. And I think he would be fine with it now.
I think he would be fine with it. I think John would be fine with it.
Mm.
I think John would think it was really cool, actually.
I think people got confused with the part in the documentary where Paul goes, we have George's guitar parts and George is on the record on the song, but then he goes on and says, I played the solo and I aped him.
I did it in the style
and so they were like,
guitar.
well, George is not on it then?
Yeah.
And George is on it, but it's...
No, I got confused.
It's just rhythm guitar George is playing from the 1995 session, which is buried in the mix.
Yeah.
You can hear it You know, he's playing, and I think he plays a little bit of electric guitar on it. You know, just ding, 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 you know, a rhythm guitar.
Yeah.
But Paul's doing the solo.
Another thing I saw on TikTok, someone say, was that Paul wrote a verse for the song, and they used AI to make John's voice sing the verse.
Listening to.
And that's not correct, I don't think.
Listening to the because I've got somebody's done they've stripped away the vocal because they've released Dolby Atmos where you can do that, you know, when you've got like the channels and stuff, you can like listen to like the separate tracks, you know.
Okay, yeah.
And you can hear that John has used Paul has used a little bit of John's voice.
Yeah.
At the tail end of some. It's hard to explain unless you hear it, you know? Because Paul is kind of like in the background and he's like. Because if you listen to the original demo, John's like, you know it's true. It's all because of you. Da, 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 da. And he goes, you know, he didn't have anything for that, you know? So Paul comes out with, we'll love you, you know?
Yeah.
Because John's just going, you know, he hasn't come up with a lyric for that yet, you know. But then it's like, now and then I miss you, you know.
Yeah.
He's kind of like, I listened to that and I thought, oh, Ringo's singing with him, but it's not. It's kind of like there's like an auto-tune going on in the background.
Yeah.
People are like, oh, it's auto-tune, but I think he's kind of double-tracked him.
Yeah.
Self. And he's kind of like using John's vocalization just to kind of like go with it, you know, go with what he's singing.
Yeah.
And so that's, you know.
But I mean, I don't think there was an entire verse that Paul wrote and they just completely used AI to make John sing it. No. I mean, not that I have heard anybody say anywhere except for this one TikTok, and everybody in the comments was like,
Paul
no,
says,
that's not right.
Oh, we used artificial intelligence to create this.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, you used sound separation technology. You didn't, because artificial intelligence people are creating video and photos and, you know.
It's a bit controversial.
It's controversial at the moment, and it's freaking people out.
Yeah.
So, you know, people are like, oh, we don't want to hear AI Beatles, and you know, it's like, oh, and he had to come out and clarify. It's like, no, we just used it to clean up the recordings.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's, you know, what it's done.
Right.
Everything, we're all playing on it, you know.
Yeah, everybody in the comments was correct.
I'm playing bass on it, Ringo's playing
TikTok.
drums on it, I've put some strings on.
Everybody in the comments was like, no. They didn't, it's actually John singing, you know.
Yeah, it's actually John singing.
It's not AI John singing anything, so, yeah.
But yeah, they cleaned up the vocal and everything, and it sounds great. And he wrote a bit of, and him with Giles Martin wrote a string accompaniment for it. And then he did the slide guitar solo and everything. And they also have bits. Giles Martin did this thing where he included bits from here, there, and everywhere. And because, as like backing vocals, you know, like vocalizations, you know.
Oh, yeah.
So there's like a, you know, it's all of them doing that, you know.
Right.
So maybe people are annoyed about that, I don't know. But people were more annoyed about the video, I think.
Oh, yeah. Well, I haven't heard any controversy about
people
that.
Went, oh, it looks cheap. Oh, it looks like, oh.
I mean, I will
and
say
Ringo
that
didn't look like he was even bothered about doing it. And it's funny because people have said, oh yeah, Giles wanted him to come into the studio to record his parts, but Ringo just did it at home.
Oh, yeah.
And Ringo wasn't, you know, and people are like, oh yeah, Ringo's not, he doesn't care now. You know, he's just like, oh yeah, I'll just do it at home. I don't want to come into the studio. I don't want to do this.
Does he ever go to the UK anymore, Ringo?
Well, no, they were recording out in Capitol in LA.
Oh.
Yeah.
And he lives in LA?
Yeah. You just couldn't be bothered.
Oh my God, what?
I mean, that's what they say anyway. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's kind of like it sounds like Giles was having to like, you know, it's like, oh, well, just send me the things and I'll film myself doing it. And, which he kind of did. It was at his house.
I mean, I will say that the video, It was a little bit, like, dated looking, I guess. But it went in line with some of the other, like, anthology stuff, and I don't know, it was reminiscent of other Beatles stuff I've seen.
It's kind of like their humour. I mean, if you've seen it, what they've kind of done is they've used outtake footage from the Hello Goodbye promo film.
Yeah.
Which they think they shot on film, which
was a little bit random, I will say.
It was a little bit random, but it was probably the best footage they could use to kind of like cut them out and chroma them into, a background.
Yeah.
And make it look natural.
Yeah, I guess so.
Because they filmed that promo in 1967 at the Savile Theatre in London. And I think they shot it on film, so it looks good. It's like high quality footage that will stand the test of time, and they can read, very high quality now. So they had bits of like John's messing about and Paul's dancing and George's dancing.
Yeah.
And, they're dancing with their old, John and George are there with Paul and Ringo, who've just recorded themselves singing into a mic. And people made fun about Ringo, like Ringo just looks like someone who's rocking out to, a song, It's like he doesn't know where he is,
Oh, no.
But, because he's singing away, he's just like, yeah, and it's just like, they've got like George and John and all that doing funny things beside them.
Yeah.
And, I think
they kind of put young Paul with old Paul, too.
Young Paul with old Paul, young George with old George.
Yeah.
Because they used...
Now and then.
And then.
Yeah.
Because they used footage of...
From the anthology.
From the anthology that they shot.
Yeah.
Of the session, and they didn't really have much of them working on that song. It was more Free as a Bird.
Yeah.
And stuff,
Mm-hmm.
And Real Love.
I mean, when I originally heard the song, I immediately liked it. It was just like...
To me, it sounded like them.
But I've heard people say it doesn't sound like the Beatles.
I don't know what
think
to
that
say
it doesn't.
With that, it's kind of like it sounds like the Beatles now, and it sounds like the Beatles then, and it's kind of like, there you go,
Yeah, to me, it sounds like, and I said this to you, it sounds like them solo. It sounds like their solo stuff, but them together. I don't know how to explain it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It doesn't sound like a Beatles record.
Because, you could argue that was what it was from the White Album onwards, really, was just them of like...
people do say that.
The White Album was really just a solo record, that they put out under the Beatles name, you know. All four of them doing solo projects, and it's this is my song, and I'm gonna do it this way. And
I've heard people say, "Oh, it sounds like a John song," and it's like, well, you could say any song that John wrote sounds like a John song, I guess, because ultimately, sometimes John wrote a song on his own and brought it to them, and they just added to it, which is what
Paul did here, and George and Ringo, I think people were more like, because there was a little shot of...
They thought it was depressing, too. There's that. There were those comments. Oh, it's depressing.
It's just kind of like a downbeat song.
Yeah. Oh, don't want this to be the last song they ever record together. Oh, it's depressing. It sounds like
that's what you're gonna get. Let It Be was kind of like, Let It Be Long and Winding Road. That was kind of like that was kind of like, oh, that was kind of downbeat.
Yeah.
Really. But I don't know what they want, really. Because it's like they were expecting I Want to Hold Your Hand Again, or something.
Yeah.
I do think it's weird that they stuck it on to Now and Then. That they stuck it on to the 1967, 1970.
What do you mean?
The Blue Album
put it on
remix.
That?
Yeah, they've stuck it on the end of that. And it's kind of like,
Well, it came, apparently, if you get the single, it comes out with Love Me Do on the
Love Me Do
side.
on the both.
Did they do anything to Love Me Do?
They just remixed it.
Oh.
It was just like, it sounds good.
Yeah.
I don't know, I'm talking about that, it's like it's the original, it's the version with Ringo on drums. not the one with Andy White and Ringo playing tambourine,
Yeah.
which I kind of prefer sometimes because it's a little bit faster than that one.
Yeah.
And I think Ringo really slaps that tambourine and it sounds good, you know.
Yeah.
It makes it a better song, I think, you know.
I don't know. I thought it was a good song. You know, I don't know what people want. It's like, okay, you don't like it, fine. Don't like it, you know.
And you know, you've got people like Philip Norman comes out with like, oh, it's a terrible song, and
yeah,
George would have hated it, and whatever.
Yes.
And you know, people just think, oh, I don't like it, and
yeah,
but there's a lot of people
agreeing
who do.
with it. There's people who don't like it. There's people who do like it.
Yeah.
One funny thing that I noticed was before it started, and I put it on Facebook because I was like, "Am I the only one? Am I crazy here?" It sort of sounded like, I don't know how much it sounded like it really, because I went and played the song after. And I didn't necessarily hear it. But when Now and Then started playing, I instantly went into Paul's This Never Happened Before.
Yeah, it's a little bit similar chord.
Sure
it's
this never happened.
It's in it's in the key of A minor, so yeah.
Yeah, and it's just like
key.
the beat, I guess, was the same, and the
everything.
piano, yeah.
Yeah, it's a similar kind of like thing, and he may have got the.
Yeah, someone was like, "Oh, maybe he had heard it when he, you know, and it just like was stuck in his head when he."
I mean, yeah, I mean, or you know, he was listening to John's demo, which is the same kind of thing, you know.
Yeah.
And you know, he was just kind of like he was stuck on finishing Now and Then.
Yeah.
So maybe that's a song that's really resonated with him, you know?
Yeah.
But yes, I mean, you know, that people go on about the video as well, like, oh, but I think the best parts of the video are the unseen bits that we didn't see.
Oh, yeah, I don't...
Before. Like the footage from Pete Best of them performing in 1961.
Oh,
it was like a snippet of footage that they
It was very quick, yeah.
Very quick. But
and where's he been holding on to that all this time?
He's had it, hasn't he?
He's just kept that quiet all these years.
Yeah. But there was also footage of George taken atop the Empire State Building in 1963.
Oh, I don't remember seeing that.
Yeah, it was like that was the big talking point for a lot of people. Were like, oh, was that AI? What's that? And it was like 8mm footage that they'd cleaned up.
Yeah.
Of George atop the Empire State Building.
That was his very first trip to America.
Very first trip to America, yeah.
I mean, fans know this.
Fans know this, you know, and he was just
when he came over to visit his sister.
Yeah.
And I guess he flew, she was living in Illinois, I think.
Yeah. And
but he would have flown into New York.
Yeah.
In and out of New York.
And, you know, they visited the Empire State Building. There's pictures of him, you know, and he's standing there, and it was like a mere, 4 months or something before the Beatles landed in America and became huge household names. He was just wandering around this tourist place, you know. It's like, oh yeah, I'm in a little band back home.
He popped into a couple of
He bought a guitar there.
A couple of radio stations and was like, oh yeah, you should play
this song.
should play this song.
Well,
yeah.
his sister had been doing
maybe
that
just
too.
one, I guess.
Louise had been doing that too. But yeah, you know, it was that kind of thing, you know. That was really cool to see.
I'm shocked. I mean, this is completely off topic now, but I'm shocked that nobody's ever made that into a little film.
What, him coming
George
over?
Harrison's first trip to America. I mean,
you don't see many Beatles biopics these days.
No.
Because they've wrapped everything up pretty tightly. Years ago, I think in the late 70s, they made this film called The Birth of the Beatles. And that was through a legal loophole. They were able to record the Beatles songs, you know.
Yeah.
And use it as a soundtrack. And so they took full advantage of that. So that's why it's a pretty terrible, film as far as factual correctness goes, because, you know, you've got George playing Don't Bother Me in Hamburg when he didn't write it for another 3 years and all that kind of stuff. But then, later on, you know, they sued I don't know if they sued Dick Clark or whatever, but they put a stop to like that.
Yeah.
And so then biographies were just of John.
Yeah.
Or the early years of the
Yeah.
Beatles before they became famous, you know?
Yeah.
Because they put a copyright on all their images and stuff like that. So if you went to like write a Beatles biopic now or a series and stuff, you'd have to get their permission to kind of use their likenesses.
Well, I know it's very expensive to use actual Beatles recordings.
The actual recordings are
I can remember years ago when American Idol they bought the Beatles catalog to use for the contestants. It cost them like $8 million, and they used it for like two seasons or something like that, because it was just like, yeah, we've got these. We're gonna have Beatles night, and every single one of you is gonna sing at least 2 songs. You know? And what else? Glee? Didn't they do a Beatles thing where they did the Beatles songs? It's always a big deal made whenever a show gets the rights to use Beatles songs. Well,
I think was it Mad Men?
Oh, maybe, yeah.
They used Tomorrow Never Knows, because they had this like scene with Don Draper or something, putting the Revolver album on. And they were like, oh, well, we can't use that. But then they shelled out like something like $2 million just to use that one song.
Oh, yeah.
Because usually now, it's just like, oh, it's $500, to the copyright artist or whatever, and that's it, But with the Beatles, it's like, oh, no. It's going to be expensive.
So I have a feeling that's why we don't see Beatles biopics.
Well, that's why you don't hear. That's why you don't really you hear them in adverts, but it's always someone covering them. Yeah. And even then, you've got to pay a little bit.
They've still got to pay.
They've still got to pay, but I don't think it's as much as of actually using the actual recording.
No. One more thing before we wrap it up. Was this? Do you think, or do we know if this was the thing that Peter Jackson said, oh, there's something else coming, ooh, and everybody was speculating what it was going to be?
I think this might have been it. But there's people going on, because he came out and said, oh, well, it's possible to, release new Beatles music. There's bits and pieces from the Get Back sessions that we didn't use. Yeah. That we could piece together a song. People are like, no, don't do it. I think the next big project is going to be the anthology, though. We haven't heard a toot or a snore about it.
You think he's going to do it?
Oh yeah, if they're giving him
what do
all
you
the
mean?
footage.
What do you mean now? What do you think is going to happen? You think they're just going to completely redo the anthology?
No, they're going to remaster it.
Yeah.
They're not going. They're going to remaster it. I think they're probably waiting till the end. When Paul and Ringo are no longer with us.
Yeah.
To do something about that. But I think they've got a lot of footage they could use. It's probably going to be expanded, remastered. The anthology albums will be remixed and, sound better and all this kind of stuff, But I think, they'll do that for like HD, and they'll upscale the existing footage, and
well, we know there's a lot of
because that's not on any streaming sites anywhere. I mean, if you only have the anthology DVDs now, because that was like 25 years ago. They released them.
Well, we know there were a lot of interviews and stuff that were on the cutting room floor. Because
and they probably
they put it all in the book, didn't they?
They put everything in the book, and you can see like where the cut happens.
Yeah.
So, will they give it all to Peter Jackson and say okay? Because I don't.
Quite frankly, I would prefer him to do like a series about the Beatles. I don't know if we've talked about Dominic and I have talked a lot about this. In just to each other. I don't know if we've mentioned in the podcast, but we both kind of hope for like a series, the first season is, 1963 or something 62, like that.
62, 63.
Yeah. And each series is another year in their lives.
Well, yeah. I mean, that would be great, but I don't think Apple would never go for it unless they were hanging over your shoulder and making sure, oh, you're not doing this now.
I don't know. Somebody needs to hear that, and we've put it out in the universe now. It's not just our idea. We've speculated doing it ourselves for many years, but it hasn't come to fruition.
Like Paul with Now and Then, we've been tinkering with it.
Yeah.
But yes, we better go.
We're going to have to cut this kind of short because, I can't.
It's not very well.
I can't. Every time I laugh, I cough, and it's just annoying.
To put her to bed now.
Thank you all
with
so
a
much.
hot water bottle.
As always, for tuning in. We really appreciate your support. Appreciate you sticking with us, especially our patrons.
Yes.
Thank you guys so much. Be sure to give us a follow on social media if you want to see all of our British content, everything that we've been doing since we've been in Britain, everywhere we've been. We went to Abbey Road, by the way, when we were in London.
Oh, we visited.
So that's coming eventually.
That's coming around.
We're slow getting it out there, but it's all going to get out there. Be sure to give us a follow on TikTok and Instagram in particular. Some of it's going up on YouTube as well.
Yeah.
And then, we tweet periodically.
Tweet about stuff that's crazy. So if you see it, comment on it.
Yeah. So
let us know.
Give us a follow. All those places. We're at TButty, TEABUTTY, and we'll talk to you all next time.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.